My dad left my sister everything, and the lawyer pulled out Grandpa's secret will, and her fake smile crumbled when I inherited it all. Imagine this. I was in a stuffy lawyer's office in Richmond, Virginia, listening to my father's last wishes, being read like a shopping list. The wooden desk was so shiny I could see my reflection, and I looked completely lost. My older sister Sarah sat across from me. Her smile perfected since childhood, the one that looked sweet as pie, but was actually totally calculating. The lawyer, a skinny guy who looked like he'd spent decades buried in law books, cleared his throat and began the big reveal. Everything important went to my sister. The house where we grew up with its wraparound porch and creaking. Wooden floors that held stories from 4 generations. Dad's successful carpentry business, built over 40 years with sawdust, sweat, and loyal customers who trusted our family name. Even those old, comfortable living room chairs that had molded perfectly to Dad's body over the years. And me, Dad. Didn't say anything about me. Not even a mention. As if I were invisible ink on the family tree. The lawyer finished reading and closed the folder with a sharp snap. And for a moment, I thought that was it. After 22 years of being someone's kid, I had been completely written out of the story. Talk about a participation trophy I didn't even get to participate. My sister's response was quick and dramatic. She gasped, clapped her manicured hand over her mouth, and shook her head as if she'd witnessed a tragedy. But her eyes were already calculating how fast she could cash in on Dad's legacy. It was like watching someone pretend to mourn at a funeral while secretly planning the after-party. The silence in that room was thick, like molasses. I sat there feeling as if I'd been erased from existence. The lawyer cleared his throat again. Apparently, there was more. He took out another document, older and yellowed at the edges like an antique treasure map. His attitude changed from routine to genuinely surprised. It turned out that my grandfather, Paul, the old fox with a twinkle in his eye, who always seemed to see more than I did, had been playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. He'd set up a separate living trust 5 years earlier, completely independent of Dad's will. The trust said that the property would automatically go to me upon my father's death. But only if I was over 21 and had completed college. Grandpa Paul had left me a stretch of sun-baked land in Floyd County, Virginia, along with an old barn that looked like it had given up during the Reagan administration. The lawyer handed me a rusty key as if he were handing over the crown jewels and explained that this inheritance was legally binding and independent of anything Dad had decided. My sister's face went through more emotions than a theater major's. Final exam. Shock, uncertainty, fury, and finally the calculating expression I knew so well. She leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the mahogany table, as if she were typing out her arguments. Her words dripped with fake concern, which felt worse than any outright insult. She said it was just weeds and a pile of junk. What was I planning to do with the abandoned acreage anyway? Become some kind of gentleman farmer? The way she put it. Farming sounded like a contagious disease. There was no anger in her voice, just a sophisticated disdain that stung more than any shouting match. Her comments weren't wrathful, just exquisitely contemptuous. That became my turning point. But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life. It eventually becomes fuel. I walked out of that office with nothing except a rusty key and a head full of questions. At 22, I had graduated from college with a degree in business, administration that seemed about as valuable as a Titanic ticket after it hit the iceberg. Of course, my entire worldly possessions fit into one beat-up suitcase, a few fading photographs, some spare clothing, a t-shirt that had seen more life, drama than a soap opera, and exactly $358 in my wallet, enough for some ramen noodles and maybe a tiny dream on clearance. The 2-hour drive to Floyd County felt like I was transported to another universe. The mountains stretched out before me like green velvet, and the air grew fresher with every mile. When I eventually pulled up to what was supposed to be my fortune, I had to laugh. The barn looked like it was held together with hope, duct tape, and sheer stubbornness, but something about the place whispered opportunities instead of problems. Perhaps it was the way the afternoon sun hit the worn wood. or how the mountains seemed to wrap around the small valley like protective arms. Or maybe I was simply desperate enough to see magic where others saw decay. Grandpa Paul was the only person who truly listened to my stories. While everyone else was concerned with practical things like career choices and mortgage rates, he'd sit with me by the creek, telling stories about the ancient days and the land's hidden potential. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. He used to say something that I dismissed as old guy philosophy. Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in the most unremarkable places. I spent the first hour wandering around, kicking at weeds, and imagining what Grandpa Paul had seen here. The barn tilted to one side like an old person with a bad hip, and the roof had more holes than a national budget plan. But beneath all that neglect, I felt something sturdy. Good bones, as Dad would have said about a piece of furniture worth restoring. The barn smelled of rodents, dust, and decades of stored hopes. I began searching, moving rusted equipment and moth-eaten hay. Bales, when I noticed something that made my heart race. Tucked away in the corner, almost hidden beneath a tarp that had seen better days, was an old wooden drawer that appeared handmade with the kind of attention to detail that screamed of love rather than necessity. This thing practically called out to me, as if it had been waiting for me my whole life. Inside that drawer, wrapped in oilcloth like priceless treasures, I discovered 3 items that would change everything. First, a yellowed envelope with writing I couldn't decipher, a strange flowing script that looked like ancient incantations. Second, a small container of dried onion-like bulbs that seemed innocent enough to overlook. And third, a sealed packet, with handwriting I recognized. The inscription on the exterior was in Grandpa Paul's recognizable handwriting, the same meticulous handwriting I remembered from birthday cards and fishing trip notes. It read, "For Aiden, when you are ready, to see what others cannot. Do not open without serious intentions." The paper felt heavy in my hands, carrying more than just words. I sat there on an overturned milk crate, surrounded by the ghost of a forgotten harvest, and opened the letter with shaking fingers. Grandpa Paul's handwriting filled the page as if he were speaking directly from beyond. Every word was chosen. With the care of a skilled artisan, the letter read like a declaration of faith. These bulbs are truly gold. Aiden's saffron crocus is the most valuable spice on the planet, but only for those who know how to wait, recognize value in the unnoticed, and are willing to invest their soul. Don't forget why we're here in these Appalachian hills. Look for a spring near the old oak. It will provide life, your grandfather Paul. I have faith in you. Remember, my boy, land is the best bank if you understand how to use it. I had to read those words 3 times before they really registered.
Saffron bulbs.
My grandfather had bequeathed me saffron bulbs and a treasure map for success. Most people would have laughed. They probably would have tossed the whole thing out and driven back to civilization. But here's what I learned about hitting rock bottom. It's actually a pretty good foundation to build on. When you have nothing to lose, everything looks like an opportunity. Those seemingly insignificant tiny bulbs symbolize something more powerful than just agricultural speculation. My grandfather's words of encouragement, his belief that I could turn dust into gold. That night, I slept on the barn floor, using my jacket as a cushion, listening to a symphony of country sounds I'd forgotten existed. Crickets, distant owls, and the whispering wind through trees that had stood since before my great-grandfather's birth. It worked better than any white noise machine or meditation app. I awoke with the sunrise, something that city living had conditioned me to do. There was something about this place resonated with natural rhythms I didn't know I still had. The morning light streaming through the barn's openings created patterns on the floor that looked almost artistic, as if the structure itself was trying to paint me a picture of possibility. During my first full day on the farm, I started to understand what Grandpa Paul had seen. It wasn't just abandoned farmland. It was land wrapped in neglect, waiting for someone with the vision and determination to unlock its potential. Despite years of disuse, the soil was still rich as I dug beneath the surface weeds. The old oak tree he mentioned in his letter stood watch in the center of what had once been a proper field. And as he had predicted, I discovered the spring. Near that oak, hidden beneath years of vegetation but still flowing pure and cool, it was like finding hidden treasure, except this treasure would keep giving indefinitely. Standing in that field, holding those priceless bulbs and feeling the weight of my grandfather's faith, I made a pledge to him, the earth, and myself. I would prove that what everyone considered useless could be transformed into something valuable. I would show them that sometimes the most important inheritance doesn't fit on a financial statement. The bitter taste of that lawyer's office slowly faded, replaced by something that tasted strangely like hope mixed with determination. I had my grandfather's property, his wisdom, his mystery saffron bulbs, and most importantly, his unwavering belief in my ability to create something amazing out of what others considered ordinary. Those seemingly worthless tiny bulbs were about to become my chance at redemption, my gateway to a whole new life. Perhaps they reflected what most people would call blind faith, but I was convinced. And sometimes, that's all it takes to spark a revolution. Or at least prove my sister wrong, which seemed like a solid start. As I stood there watching the sunset, behind the Appalachian peaks, paint the sky with colors that would make an Instagram filter green with envy, I couldn't stop smiling. Everyone thought they knew what the inheritance was worth. They saw abandoned acreage and a dilapidated barn. But I was starting to see something else entirely. The foundation of aspirations and the raw material for unimaginable tomorrows. The real work was about to begin, and I had a feeling my grandfather's final lesson was just getting started. Tomorrow brought a wake-up call more powerful than my college alarm clock. Saffron isn't for the lazy. This wasn't just a weekend gardening effort or a pretty little hobby farm that Instagram could romanticize. This was agricultural warfare. I was about to discover that the land doesn't care about your emotions or your college degree. The first thing I learned about saffron growing is that it demands everything from you: patience, hard work, and knowledge you didn't know existed. I was digging soil, calculating pH levels, and researching drainage patterns as if I were preparing for a NASA expedition to Mars. My hands developed calluses that looked like abstract art painted in pain. My legs ached from constant standing, as if I were working to factory jobs. Those initial weeks were tough in ways I didn't expect. I was ripping rocks from the ground that looked like they'd been placed there by giants, digging furrows with my bare hands until they bled, and spending my evenings reading agricultural magazines about saffron types I'd never heard of. Crocus and corn proliferation became new vocabulary words for me. This was my personal battlefield, and I was determined to win the war. Every morning, I'd wake up before sunrise, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me had shifted. The earth was now making the decisions, and I was learning to listen. I'd stumble out of the barn where I'd set up a makeshift bedroom, grab some instant coffee that tasted like liquid disappointment, and get back to work on making this forgotten bit of Appalachian dirt into something special. During those long days of backbreaking labor, I found myself recalling Grandpa Paul's words from our fishing trips by the lake. He used to say something that makes more sense now than ever before. Land always pays back those who respect it. It's like an old friend. The more you give, the more you get. His voice became my compass, my silent companion in this crazy undertaking that everyone else said would fail. The old man had grasped the concept of the relationship between human effort and natural reward that most people take a lifetime to understand. Every blister on my hands, every ache in my back, and every drop of sweat that fell to the ground felt like I was depositing money into a dividend-paying account. But while the physical labor was tough, dealing with the local farming community was downright hilarious. The folks at the Rusty Mug, the local cafe that served as the unofficial headquarters for agricultural news, looked at me like I was some strange species that had crawled out from under a rock. Their collective wisdom boiled down to barely hidden derision, disguised as polite concern. They'd sit there sipping their coffee and making observations that were as subtle as a freight train. Comments about the city boy planting mystery bulbs for soup, or whether the recent rain had softened my brain. One especially charming fellow joked, "You might be looking for trouble in all the wrong places," as if saffron cultivation was some dangerous hobby for those with too much time and too little sense. I just smiled and nodded, keeping my thoughts. To myself, let them laugh, I reasoned. After all, the best laugh is usually the last one. These were decent people at heart, but they were also creatures of habit, having grown the same crops, the same way, for generations. Innovation wasn't their strong suit, and I couldn't blame them for being skeptical of something they hadn't seen before. Being the first person in Floyd County history to undertake commercial saffron farming would either make me a pioneer or serve as a cautionary tale. The jury was still out on which category I belonged to, but each day that went by without giving up felt like a small win against the doubters. Just as I was beginning to believe that my only important conversations would be with my blistering hands, fate decided to throw me a curveball that changed everything. Her name was Sarah, and she appeared as if from a turning point scene. Not overly dramatic, just right, the kind of presence that changes things without making a big deal about it. Sarah was a Virginia Tech agricultural student who had arrived in rural Floyd County to fulfill an internship requirement. She wasn't simply another assistant. She was a ray of sunshine in a world that had been mostly cloudy for months. Her eyes were filled with curiosity about everything agricultural, and she believed in my crazy saffron project more than I did. Where the local farmers saw soup ingredients and questionable lifestyle choices, Sarah saw potential gold. She glanced at my meticulously planted bulbs and began discussing business options, export potential, and what she called artisanal agricultural products. She spoke my grandfather's language of possibilities, but with a modern vocabulary appropriate. For someone who valued both heritage and innovation, she became more than just a cheerleader or assistant. Sarah was my intellectual partner, the person who could see the vision I was trying to create and helped make it a reality. She embodied the ideal statement about vision and action. Vision without action is just hallucination, but action without vision is a nightmare. We had both, and the combination seemed unstoppable. One of the first practical tasks Sarah helped me with was fixing the old spring near the oak tree that Grandpa Paul mentioned in his letter. The locals had forgotten it existed, but she approached it like an archaeological dig. Water quality tests, proper legal registration of water rights, and environmental impact assessments. She transformed my grandfather's cryptic treasure map into practical modern agriculture. She knelt beside the spring and said, "The land is breathing, Aiden." Her words sounded like prayers. She knew what my grandfather was trying to tell me, but she was able to translate his old-school thinking into modern, practical language. Sarah also brought something unexpected: social media savvy. Began chronicling our progress, making videos about what she called gold on American soil. Her content was more than just pretty pictures. It was storytelling that connected ancient farming knowledge to modern agricultural innovation. She made our tiny saffron experiment feel like it was part of something broader, rather than just one guy trying to prove his sister wrong. The videos began to attract attention. Not exactly viral, but there was consistent interest from people who respected the story we were telling. Comments from fellow farmers, culinary connoisseurs, and those who understood that true quality takes time and effort. It felt like we were creating something more than just a crop, a community of people who believed in doing things well. Then something extraordinary started happening. Those small saffron bulbs I planted with more hope than knowledge began to show signs of life. Small green shoots appeared first, followed by delicate purple blossoms like tiny stars poking through the dirt. Each fresh bloom felt like a personal win, confirmation that my grandfather's confidence hadn't been misplaced, and that all those weeks of backbreaking labor had resulted in something worthwhile. I'd get up every morning and rush to check on progress, counting new blossoms like a miser counts pennies. Sarah would meet me there most mornings, and we'd walk around the rows together, talking about harvest scheduling, processing methods, and marketing ideas. Those early morning chats, surrounded by purple flowers and dawn mist, were some of the happiest I'd experienced in years. But just as things seemed to be going well, my past made an unexpected entrance. My sister arrived. At the property, like a black cloud moving in before a storm, she emerged from her fancy SUV, dressed in clothes costing more than my monthly grocery bill, and with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She surveyed the property as if she were preparing it for auction, her gaze lingering on the purple blossoms. With barely veiled calculation, this was not a familial visit motivated by sisterly care or curiosity about my farming experiment. It was reconnaissance, and I could feel the tension radiating from her like hot asphalt in August. It didn't take long to find out why she had come to my little corner of Virginia. Sarah's gold on American soil videos had gained significant traction, with hundreds of thousands of views and attention from food bloggers and agricultural journalists. My sister had always been brilliant at sniffing out opportunities, and she clearly smelled profit. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in deception, disguised as a family issue. We began discussing partnership ideas, merging our resources, and leveraging her business connections to help grow the company. Her voice was honey, but I could taste the venom behind each syllable. Then followed the legal threats. She began waving papers around and discussing technical problems in Grandpa Paul's trust, citing a clerical error with the witness signatures or the notarization date. The implication was clear. Give me a share of your success, or I'll complicate your legal situation. Her exact words were delivered with the perfect blend of false concern and implied menace she'd honed over the years. Something about how I couldn't possibly want to get into a court war with my own sister, right? Perhaps we could figure something out that would benefit both of us. Her sweet voice was more harmful than any shouting match could be. But here's the thing about doing hard labor for months and creating something out of nothing. It changes you in unexpected ways. I wasn't the confused 22-year-old sitting in a lawyer's office anymore. I'd grown real calluses, both physical and emotional. I discovered the thrill of producing something valuable through sheer labor and determination. I stared at her, then at Sarah, and finally at the purple flowers, which symbolized months of sweat, trust, and persistence. Even I was astonished by my response, which was both confident and strong. I told her I wasn't the same kid anymore, that the land meant more than just real estate or an economic prospect. This was my chance, my inheritance, my choice, and I wasn't giving it up to anyone, especially not to someone who would cheat me when I had nothing. Expression changed abruptly and unpleasantly. The fake concern vanished like makeup in the rain, replaced by the cold calculation I recognized from our childhood. She knew that her usual tactics wouldn't work, that our relationship had evolved in unexpected ways. Sarah didn't say anything, but her presence screamed louder than any legal argument my sister could present. She stood like a root buried deep in the hard Appalachian soil, unmoving and immovable. Her quiet strength reminded me that I was no longer fighting this battle alone. After my sister drove away, spitting gravel in her luxury SUV and leaving behind the kind of angry energy that takes hours to disperse, Sarah and I lingered among the purple flowers, processing what had happened. The confrontation had been uncomfortable, but it had also provided clarity. I'd drawn a line in the soil, literally and metaphorically, and there was no turning back. We spent the rest of the day in peaceful calm, tending to the saffron plants and preparing for the harvest, still several weeks away. The physical effort felt soothing after the emotional intensity of the morning, and I found myself reflecting on how much I had changed since getting this farm. That evening, as we watched the sunset behind the mountains, transforming the sky into a palette of colors rivaling our purple flowers, Sarah made an observation that resonated with me. She said that finding the optimal fertilizer for growth isn't always easy. Plants, like people, grow stronger when forced to struggle for what they want. The first significant test was behind us, but I had a hunch bigger problems were on the way. Success has a way of attracting attention, both positive and negative, and we were only getting started on this adventure. The saffron was growing. The videos were gaining traction. My sister realized her little brother wouldn't be pushed around anymore. But for that moment, sitting among the purple flowers with someone who shared my vision, anything seemed possible. The hard work was paying off, both physically and figuratively. The soil was responding to our care. The plants were flourishing, and I was becoming the person my grandfather had predicted I would be. The path to genuine gold was proving to be as difficult as he had warned, but it was also more rewarding than I had anticipated. The fields were blooming, and so was I not into someone new, but into who I was supposed to be. The fields were flourishing, but there was also worry. My sister's legal threats were more than just empty words in the mountain air. They were serious issues that required real solutions. Sarah and I realized we had to act quickly before her lawyers discovered some loophole to exploit, some technicality that could undo everything Grandpa Paul had meticulously built. We decided to take a road trip to Richmond, which felt like a combination of detective work and legal archaeology. Our goal was simple: locate someone who could attest to my grandfather's actual intentions and end the inheritance dispute once and for all. The trip across Virginia's beautiful countryside allowed us time to plan, but mostly we tried to stay positive while bracing for the worst. That's when we met Mr. Harold Patton, a notary who'd been in Richmond since the Carter administration. This guy was old school in the best way possible, the type of expert who kept thorough records and remembered his clients as individuals rather than just signatures on documents. When we heard Grandpa Paul's name, his wrinkled face brightened with genuine familiarity. Mr. Patton pulled out files that looked like they belonged in a museum, but his memory was razor sharp. He told us stories about my grandfather I hadn't heard before, about how the old man had been quite meticulous in establishing that trust. According to Harold, Grandpa Paul had specifically stated that he was looking for the boy who saw with his heart instead of his eyes. These words struck me more than I expected. My granddad saw something in me that I wasn't aware of at the time. Mr. Patton's testimony was exactly what we needed: official verification that my inheritance was substantial and legally binding. This was a temporary win, but we both knew the real war was just beginning. Someone will always want a piece of your pie, especially if it becomes profitable. The relief I felt driving back toward Floyd County was amazing. We dealt with the legal threat. The Saffron was flourishing, and for the first time in months, I felt optimistic about this strange venture. Sarah was planning for the upcoming crop, discussing processing methods and market strategies that made our small enterprise seem nearly professional. However, reality has a way of reminding you that victory laps should definitely be saved for when you truly cross the finish line. We were about an hour outside Floyd, just beginning to see the familiar lights of town glimmering in the distance, like scattered promises. We saw something that turned my blood cold: smoke. This wasn't the delicate wisps you'd get from a fireplace or a controlled burn in the distance. This was heavy, black, pungent smoke rising from the exact direction of my property. The kind of smoke that signals something vital is being destroyed. My heart sank to my stomach and stayed there. As we got closer, it became clear this wasn't a random brush fire or a neighboring farmer's burn pile. This smoke was pouring from my crops, my dreams, and everything I had been working on for months. The air seemed to get heavier with each mile, carrying the scent of ruin and betrayal. Sarah grabbed my hand as we drove into the driveway, both of us staring at what used to be rows of meticulously maintained saffron plants. It now looked like a war zone, with scorched earth strewn across what had been purple flowers. Just that morning, the fire crew was still there, hosing down hot spots and making sure the flames didn't spread to the adjacent woodland. The fire chief, a tired-looking man with sunken cheeks and sorrowful eyes, confirmed what we already suspected but didn't want to believe. This wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately started this fire, using what appeared to be an accelerant, to ensure it burned hot and quickly. His exact words were colder than the ashes that still smoldered in my field. Someone wanted to make sure your saffron wasn't welcome here. Whoever did this had been watching, waiting for the day we weren't there. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was premeditated malice. Standing there among the debris of months of backbreaking work, I felt something inside me snap in a way I had never felt before. This wasn't just property destruction or agricultural sabotage. It was someone trying to destroy my aspirations before they could fully develop. The violation felt personal, causing my hands to shake with rage and powerlessness. That's when remembered Mr. Hicks's eyes. Our neighbor, the old farmer who lived about a quarter-mile down the road, had been giving me odd looks since I started working the field. His face was a mix of envy and hatred, and I had been too preoccupied with my own task to really notice it. Now, standing among the ashes of my fantasies, I remembered something Mr. Patton had said back in Richmond, something about my father. making informal pledges to neighbors regarding this land before my grandfather took over with the official trust. He must have expected to pay a low price for this land when my father sold it, only to see some city kid turn it into something profitable instead. Some people refuse to forgive success, especially when they believe it should have been theirs, even if it was achieved through blood, sweat, and more dedication than common sense. I couldn't confirm it was him, but the timing felt strangely convenient, and the look in his eyes was filled with more than just neighborly curiosity. I sat down in the center of the burned field. Everything I had worked for was reduced to ashes and disappointment. This was the very bottom of the basement, and I just smashed through the floor. It felt as if life was asking me if I truly believed this would be easy. If I had truly believed that someone like me could transform dust into gold without consequence. But then, Sarah did something that likely saved my sanity and perhaps my entire future. She knelt next to me in that scorched field, wrapped her arms around me, and spoke words more powerful than any wall I'd ever leaned against. She told me that saffron persists in stone, that I would also be able to survive this, that we would get through this together. Her voice was firm and confident as she emphasized that sometimes everything has to burn down before you can build something truly solid. This wasn't the end of our story. It was simply the end of the first chapter. Her words became my lifeline. At that moment, demonstrating that even when everything seems hopeless, someone believing in you can make all the difference. The strongest people, she said, are the ones who can smile through tears because they know there's always tomorrow. That felt like a discovery wrapped in an embrace. I'd been so preoccupied with what I'd lost that I'd forgotten what I still had. The land, the knowledge I'd gained, Sarah's partnership, and my grandfather's steadfast trust, echoing from beyond the grave. We spent that night preparing our comeback rather than grieving our losses. Starting fresh wasn't simply the only choice. Available, it was also the best option. If anyone thought they could scare me off my own land with a little arson, they were badly underestimating the tenacity I inherited from both sides of my family. That's when Grandpa Paul revealed his final secret. While we were cleaning up the barn and figuring out how to fund a complete restart, I noticed something unusual about one section of the floor. A few boards looked fresher than the others, and when I pulled them up, I discovered an ancient tin box buried beneath a collection of rusty tools. That package contained enough cash to make me dizzy, as well as a note written in my grandfather's recognizable handwriting. The message was simple but profound. This was for the darkest day when everything looked lost. He hoped I'd use it, when defeat seemed unavoidable, and he reminded me that true ideals never burn. That old fox had been playing chess while the rest of us were still learning checkers. He had predicted that success would attract opponents, that someone would want to ruin what we were building. His insight felt like a message from beyond, a reminder that he'd always been one step ahead and that he'd planned for this very scenario. Finding that money was like uncovering a secret weapon just when the battle seemed lost. It wasn't simply the financial resources. It was evidence that my grandfather believed so strongly in this enterprise that he planned for its most risky moments. The man had been a strategic genius, posing as a plain mountain farmer. Sarah's reaction to this unexpected fortune was quite inspiring. She used our tragedy as fuel for something bigger than either of us had dreamed. Her social media crowdfunding campaign was about more than just raising money. It was also about presenting a story that touched people all around the country. The video she made from the ashes and smoke, showing the first new saffron shoots emerging from the burned soil, went viral in unexpected ways. People were seeing more than just agricultural information. They were experiencing a story of tenacity, hope, and what she called the true American spirit. People who knew that this was about more than just cultivating pricey spices left comments. This was about standing up to someone who was trying to destroy your dreams. This was about refusing to quit, even if it was the natural choice. This was about demonstrating that sometimes the best answer to destruction is quick, uncompromising regeneration. The response was overwhelming in the best way. Donations came from chefs who wanted to support American-grown saffron, farmers who had suffered their own sabotage, and others who just felt that hard work and perseverance would triumph despite jealousy and destruction. We weren't just rebuilding a saffron farm. We were creating a community of believers. In 3 months, we were not just back, but bigger, stronger, and more rooted than ever. The fire that was supposed to destroy us became the spark that fueled our greatest progress. Ironically, our saboteur provided us with a story that no marketing effort could ever replicate. Rebirth from ashes that captivated people's imaginations and opened their hearts and wallets. Working those fields felt different this time. Every bulb we planted represented the weight of everyone who believed in our comeback story. Every row we made was a middle finger to whoever had tried to damage our future. Every day we spent rebuilding demonstrated that certain dreams are too stubborn to be buried, even when someone literally tries to burn them out of existence. Sarah and I created a rhythm that seemed almost choreographed. She'd handle the social media updates and community interaction, while I focused on the actual farming, which was becoming second nature. We were becoming a genuine team in ways that went beyond business partnerships or romantic connections. The fresh saffron plants grew with seemingly superhuman determination. Perhaps the ash enriched the soil. Perhaps it was our enhanced technique. Or perhaps it was simply the universe's way of rebalancing the scales after we had been struck down so hard. Whatever the cause, those purple blossoms grew stronger and more colorful than our last attempt. Looking back, I can see how the flames served a purpose I didn't understand at the time. They burned away my ignorance about how the world works, my assumption that everyone would be pleased with my accomplishment, and my notion that hard work would be enough to ensure results. But they didn't burn away what really mattered. My grandfather's knowledge, Sarah's faith, or my own steadfast resolve to never give up. The fire was supposed to bring our story to an end, but it instead served as a crucible, forging something greater than what we began with. From the ashes of betrayal, we created something that could not be destroyed by envy or sabotage, because it was founded on communal solidarity and unwavering determination. As autumn arrived and our first genuine harvest approached, I realized what my grandfather had meant about the best things growing in the deepest dirt. Sometimes the soil must be burned clean before it can nurture anything truly valuable. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what you're truly capable of creating. The flames of betrayal had tested us in ways I never imagined, but we'd come out stronger, sharper, and more loyal than ever. Now it was time to show the world what true saffron gold looked like when it grew on American soil, enriched with equal parts determination and ashes. Our first proper harvest arrived. With autumn painting the mountains, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried as hell. Everything we'd been through, my sister's threats, the fire, the restless nights spent rebuilding from the ground up, came down to these few weeks. Walking through the fields of purple flowers at daybreak felt like entering a fantasy I had almost given up on. Each flower was flawless, almost too beautiful to disturb. But this wasn't about appreciating beautiful flowers anymore. This was about demonstrating that American soil could produce something the world had never seen before. Harvesting saffron is like performing surgery with your fingers. You have to remove each fragile stigma from the heart of the crocus blossom, quickly, as the window for peak quality is measured in hours rather than days. Sarah and I formed an almost meditative rhythm, with her handling the documentation and quality control and me focusing on the actual plucking. Every petal and stigma felt like a part of my story, my struggle, my transformation. I wanted to get away from this dust, from the grime, from farm life, which I thought was a thing of the past. Actual gold, and the very thing I tried to avoid. The irony wasn't lost on me. The city boy had become more of a farmer than anyone in Floyd County. When we finally weighed our first commercial harvest, the results astounded me. 3.7 pounds of the cleanest saffron I'd ever seen. To put this into perspective, it takes approximately 150 blossoms to make 1 gram of saffron. We hand-processed almost 250,000 individual flowers. My fingers were stained purple for weeks, but they were the most gorgeous stains I'd ever had. The market's response was quick and tremendous. We were selling wholesale at $3,000, pound and retail at $20 per gram in these lovely little glass jars Sarah had created. Each jar bore a copy of Grandpa Paul's handwriting along with our brand name, Old Dervish Gold. It was more than just a product name. It was a monument to his faith, legacy, and belief in making the unthinkable become the inevitable. Registering our trademark was like planting a flag on conquered land. We were no longer just local farmers, but a respectable company with a meaningful identity. The Eco Fair in Denver was our coming-out celebration, and we recognized how unique our product was. People were captivated, not only by the quality of the jars, but also by the story behind each one. Food bloggers began calling us artisanal agriculture at its finest. Chefs from restaurants I had only seen on television were placing orders. Food Network contacted us about sharing our story. We had progressed from an agricultural experiment to a legitimate company faster than I could have dreamed. The financial transformation was far more dramatic. By the end of our second season, we had generated $180,000 in pure profit. This wasn't just good money. It was proof that if you're willing to work hard and smart enough, your aspirations can become a reality. We bought adequate drying equipment, extended our growing space, employed 2 local farmers who had previously laughed at our crazy Saffron initiative. Watching those same individuals who had derided a city boy suddenly apply for jobs was fulfilling in ways I can't express. Sometimes the best revenge is massive success. However, success also presented new obstacles. Following another failed arson attempt, this one smaller, more akin to amateur vandalism, we put surveillance cameras around the property. I told Sarah that I finally knew what jealousy looked like. It prefers to remain in the shadows and avoids the light. Some people can't stand watching others succeed, especially when it exposes their own shortcomings. The cameras were well worth the money, both for security and peace of mind. We could concentrate on expanding our company rather than continually looking over our shoulders. Though I must confess, there was something darkly humorous about filming. Our wannabe saboteur, fumbling around in the dark like a bargain supervillain. Sarah, the great strategist she had become, began devising ideas that made my head spin with their scope. She intended to expand into export markets like Canada and the European Union, promoting our product as premium. Organic saffron from the picturesque Blue Ridge Mountains. Her vision was global in scale, yet grounded in our local history. She had a way of explaining our purpose that sounded almost lyrical. Our saffron was more than just a spice. It was history, quality, and the American ideal packed into every jar. She was correct. Of course, we weren't just marketing a product. We were selling the idea that quality can arise in the most unexpected locations. By the second year, we had earned $520,000. The transformation was complete. I'd gone from being the family's disappointment to the Appalachian Saffron Kid, a nickname that was far superior to anything I'd been called growing up. Sometimes you just need to prove everyone wrong, and the best way to do so is to produce undeniable results. The reverence in people's voices when discussing our operation was intoxicating. We had become a success story that small communities were proud to claim as their own. Floyd County had gone from tolerating our unusual agricultural experiment to hailing us as hometown heroes. My sister then decided to make another appearance. This time she wore a smile that seemed glued to her face, but never reached her eyes. She showed up to discuss collaboration opportunities, synergistic effects, stocks and investments, and the future of our family legacy. Her voice oozed honey, yet I could taste the bitterness beneath each word. The discourse was strange in its shamelessness. She genuinely proposed that we combine our company and use her contacts to help us build up operations. The woman who had dismissed me as useless when I had nothing wanted to be my business partner now that I had everything. The audacity was nearly astounding, but I wasn't the confused child sitting in a lawyer's office anymore. I had grown calluses, both physical and emotional. I'd learned what real work felt like, what true accomplishment tasted like, and what it meant to create something valuable from nothing. Her proposal felt like an insult to everything I had done to get here. My response was calm, deliberate, and definitive. I reminded her that she'd had her chance when it counted. When I needed encouragement and belief, all I had was dust, grime, and an old man's faith in my abilities. That dust had given me more than she could have possibly imagined, more than her inheritance had given her. I had found my way, and she had clearly misplaced hers a long time ago. Watching her drive away for what I knew would be the final time felt like closing a chapter that should have been completed years ago. The past had finally passed. The person who had previously made me feel small and worthless no longer had control over my present or future. Success had affected more than just my bank account. It had also altered my essential personality. Sarah and I stood in our thriving fields, inhaling the perfume of success, which smelled remarkably like purple flowers and mountain air. We had created something together that couldn't be bought, inherited, or stolen. We built it through determination, collaboration, and the kind of tenacious faith that my grandfather saw in me before I recognized it in myself. The Appalachian Mountains surrounded us like protective arms, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt fully at ease, not just in the surroundings, but also in my own skin, in my decisions, in the life I had created from scratch. The youngster who longed to escape the dust had grown into a man who knew how to turn dust into gold. The greatest treasures are not what you find, but what you create. And by the third season, our creations were nothing short of astounding. 6 acres of Virginia mountain land were covered in purple saffron flowers that resembled a velvet carpet of dreams stretching toward the Blue Ridge Mountains. I still can't believe the numbers. $1.1 million in profit. Who would have thought? That dust could turn into gold? Not just metaphorical gold, but the kind that pays mortgages, builds futures, and demonstrates that sometimes the most insane ideas are disguised as the most rational schemes. The change in how people viewed us was almost as significant as our financial achievement. It's the same farming cooperative that once mocked the crazy city kid and his mysterious bulbs now proudly calls our product Floyd County Gold. We'd progressed from local curiosity to neighborhood heroes, from agricultural experiment to regional pride. Sometimes you just have to show folks that you're more than a dreamer. You're a magician who can make dreams come true. The respect in their voices, as they discussed our work, was more valuable than any apology they could have given for their initial doubts. Success provided us with options that I had never envisioned. We developed the Paul Thompson Memorial Scholarship for Appalachian farm youth, who aspired to attend college but lacked the financial means to do so. Grandpa Paul always said that true wealth is what you can share with others. In establishing that scholarship felt like the most meaningful thing I'd ever done with money. Standing at the scholarship ceremony, watching these brilliant young faces light up with possibility, I realized what my grandfather had been trying to teach me all along. Success is more than just personal achievement. It's about using your good fortune to help the next generation. The children who received those scholarships had the same eager expression in their eyes as I had when I first held those saffron bulbs. However, the most valuable riches we had collected could not be measured in dollars or acres. Sarah and I had created something that went beyond professional partnership or even romantic affection. We built a life that felt meaningful, sustainable, and firmly based in the land and our shared beliefs. On a crisp October morning, the harvest almost finished and the mountains painted in colors that matched our purple flowers, I made a decision that felt as natural as breathing. In the same area where raging flames had previously threatened to kill everything, surrounded by thousands of saffron blossoms wafting gently in the mountain breeze, I proposed to Sarah. The words flowed from a place deeper than my thinking, straight from the heart that she had helped heal and strengthen. I told her that she saw something in me that no one else could. She stood by my side when everything around us was on fire. She'd been my light in the darkness, my anchor in the storm, and my companion in transforming the unthinkable into the inevitable. Without her, this dust would never turn into saffron. Without her belief, my grandfather's faith would have been wasted on someone who was too afraid to take the risks that true achievement requires. She wasn't only my business partner or girlfriend. She was my ultimate gold, the treasure that made all the other treasures worthwhile. Her remark was typical Sarah. Practical knowledge wrapped in genuine emotion. Her grin was brighter than the sun above our fields, and her words carried the same steady strength that had gotten us through every hardship. She explained that she had just seen the gold, which was already there and waiting to be discovered. I'd done the digging, planting, and believing, even when it seemed impossible. Now we'd grow that gold together, season after season, year after year. Her eyes seemed like the final piece of a puzzle I'd been putting together my entire life without knowing what the picture was supposed to look like. Planning our wedding turned out to be another exercise in creative problem-solving. We chose to hold the ceremony right there in the Saffron fields, with the Blue Ridge Mountains serving as our cathedral and the purple flowers as our carpet. It felt like the only fitting venue for two people who had grown their love from the same soil that had provided us with a living. The guest list spoke for itself. Agricultural families who had become part of our extended community, customers who had become friends, and agriculture extension agents who had assisted us in navigating the technical obstacles of our peculiar crop. Even several of the guys from the Rusty Mug showed up, most likely to see if the crazy Saffron project would result in a crazy Saffron wedding. The ceremony was modest, meaningful, and uniquely us. There were no extravagant venue rentals or imported flowers, just two people making vows while surrounded by their own work and the beauty of the land that had brought them together. When the minister declared us husband and wife, the cheers bounced off the mountains as if nature itself was celebrating our marriage. Our honeymoon was a working vacation, a trip to Spain to learn about traditional saffron farming methods and explore export potential. Leave it to us to turn our romantic holiday into agricultural research. But that's what happens when your passion turns into a profession, and your profession becomes your life's work. Coming home to Floyd County as a married couple felt like completing the circle that began when I first handled those mystery bulbs in my grandfather's letter. The land appeared the same, but everything felt different, more permanent, more meaningful, as if we were creating something that would last for generations. We began creating long-term plans for expansion, value-added goods, possibly even a small processing facility to serve other specialty crop growers in the region. Sarah proposed agritourism, culinary lessons, and farm-to-table dinners that would highlight not only our saffron, but the complete agricultural heritage of Appalachian villages. The fourth season presented unexpected challenges. Good problems, but problems nonetheless. Demand was outpacing our production capability, and we were receiving requests from wholesalers across the country. We had to choose between development and quality, expansion and sustainability, and success versus preserving the close relationship to the land that had enabled our success in the first place. We resolved to grow gradually and deliberately, honoring both our grandfather's wisdom and our own hard-earned experience. Some opportunities we pursued, others we graciously declined. We discovered that not every door you can open is one you should walk through. 5 years after acquiring a strip of abandoned property and a box of mystery bulbs, we were running $1 million agricultural company that employed 12 people and served as a symbol of rural economic progress for the region. State agriculture. Officials used us as a case study. Business schools sent students to speak with us about entrepreneurship and sustainable agriculture. The most important metric of our performance, however, was much simpler. When I walked across our fields in the early morning, inhaling the aroma of saffron flowers and mountain air, I felt fully at ease with myself and what we'd created together. The youngster who wished to escape the dust had grown into a man who realized that with enough faith, hard work, and love, dust could be turned into gold. The bequest I believed was useless had become the foundation of a life more valuable than money could buy. Standing in those beautiful meadows with Sarah alongside me, watching the dawn rise over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and thinking about my grandfather's letter still tucked away in our safe, I finally understood what he was trying to tell me. Some gold doesn't gleam, but it smells like dreams, blooms like hope, and endures like love. They assumed it was dust, proved it was gold. Real farm, real product, real victory. And the best part? We were just getting started on the next chapter of a story that would undoubtedly surprise us as much as everyone else. Looking down at your feet can help you figure out where you fit in the world. Sometimes it's necessary to peek under an old floorboard in a barn where love masquerades as abandoned tools and wisdom is priceless.